All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I want to come real quick and clear something up. You see the caption of the video, and the caption stems from a post I made yesterday. The post was concerning a teacher who made some comments. I did a video about the comments. I posted them online, a couple of groups, and the video got a few thousand views. There was a large conversation in this one particular group. The group has since took the post down, but during the conversation, and I won't get into the conversation, but during the conversation, a lot of people, as they normally do when I point out something that's controversial or at least questionable, they say one of two things. They say I'm being divisive or I'm spreading hate. But my favorite is they called me a racist. Now, concerning the video yesterday, I mentioned what the teacher said. I mentioned a child told me that she thought it was racist, but I said it was just questionable. Nevertheless, I never called the lady racist. I never called the lady anything because I know what racism is. But most of the time when people, bring up those talking points, so you're racist, that lets me know that they're one of two things. They're either emotional, or three things rather: emotional, illogical, or they're unlearned. And my typical response to people who would say, "Well, you're being racist," and my response to them is, I, as a black person in America, do not have the power to be racist. When people tell me that, that lets me know that they do not know what the true definition of racism is. So I decided today to give you guys, both black, white, green, Hispanic, whoever, a true definition of what racism is. Now, first, I'll tell you what racism is not. Racism is not just saying, okay, well, I don't like black people, or, I can't stand white people, or, I wish all Mexicans would go back to Spain. That is not racism. Now, that's offensive, that may be discriminatory, but that is not racism. Racism is me saying that and have the power to back it up. Me saying, okay, well, I wish all black people were in jail. And I have a system set up to make sure that more black people go to jail. Racism deals with the ability of one group of people to control the resources or deny another group of people from getting those resources, getting the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that was set forth in the Constitution. Racism is not just not liking anybody. Racism is taking that not liking them and being able to affect their lives, i.e., slavery, Jim Crow, segregation. Those are acts of racism. Me, in my current position, I'm going to give you a couple of definitions. I do not have the power to set any laws, any statutes, or enforce any policies amongst anyone that's going to affect their lives adversely. However, the inverse is definitely true. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. But let me give you this example from Merriam-Webster. Racism is a belief that race is a determinate human trait and that racial differences produces a superior race. Now, we all know people in the past, Hitler, even the white supremacists of old, felt that blacks and other people were inferior races. And they used that ideology to suppress, subjugate, enslave, dehumanize other races because of that police. That is racism, to the ability to enact your will in the form of dominance. at another over another group of people. I don't have that power. Okay? Merriam-Webster continues. The systemic oppression of a racial group to the social, economic, and political advantage of another group. Once again, we're talking about systemics, systems, and it goes on to say in this definition, white supremacy. That is the definition, and that goes with the first definition, believing, or once believing, and some people still do, that their white race is superior to all other races. Therefore, they use that ideology to suppress, subjugate, and justify the dehumanizing treatment of other people. Once again, and it continues to say, a political or social system founded on racism and designed to execute its principles. Now, we know that this country, America, was founded on the basis of racism, be it the indigenous people here or the people that they brought over and also enslaved some who were here to their benefit, their social, economic, and political advantage. That is racism. I, Richard Taylor, don't have the power to deny any white person who goes to a bank, or black person for that matter, who goes to a bank and try to get a loan. I do not have the power to deny a person justice who goes to the court and seeks justice. I do not have the power to prevent anyone from getting hired if they're qualified. However, the inverse is true. Now, let's look at this second definition from the Human Rights Commission. Once again, racism focuses on, and this is the definition, laws, policies, ideologies, and barriers that prevent people from experiencing justice, dignity, and equity based on their race. Now, once again, what law, what policy, what ideology, what barrier that I, Richard Taylor, or any black person in America for that matter, can enact that would prevent another person of another race from enjoying those things, right? We're talking about laws, ideas, policy. Think about a famous law, the Dred Scott decision in 1857, written into law, that said a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. That is the definition of racism, and a literal law that said one group of people don't have to respect another group of people, and there's nothing you can do about it. Jim Crow, segregation, going in the back door, all of those things are racism. Me saying, okay, well, I don't like, German people because their eyes are blue. That is not racism. That's prejudice. However, if I take it a step farther and say, okay, all Germans need to be in concentration camps and be executed like Hitler did, that is racism. That is having the power to act out the prejudices and the biases that we have. And I'm going to read you one more from Cambridge Dictionary. Once again, policies, behaviors, and rules that result in a continued unfair advantage to a group of people and the advantage of another people. racism here. We're not talking about prejudice. We're not talking about discrimination. We're not talking about biases. We're talking about racism, a set of laws, policies, and behavior that are backed up by institutions. None of this you're talking about. If I point out, say, hey, this teacher said something that could be considered racist. Oh, you're racist because you said that. That is the most asinine, childish, emotional response to the conversation that leads to unproductivity. What I'm doing now is having a productive conversation to kind of enlighten people on what is going on. And we all know that they are still racist systems operating in America today. That is why we always having these, the first black person to do this, or the first black person to do this. Here in 2024, even the first black president 8 years ago. Why was he the first? Because there was a system, and there is a system that prevented blacks from rising to that level. All in politics. And let me give you a few examples. I'm going to give you some examples from years past, but I'm also going to give you some examples from now. Examples of racism, as I told you, the Dred Scott decision, slavery, Jim Crow, the black codes. These were laws set in place to prevent black people from advancing and make sure that the other people advance. I give you one example. They had something called the Red Summer. Some years before the Civil Rights Movement, where a lot of black people in towns began to fight back. And there was one particular summer, I think it was in D.C., where these army guys, these black army men who came home from the war, and they started standing up for themselves and defending themselves. Now, because they were trained to fight and shoot, they started defending themselves, and they actually started winning up in D.C. They started now, when the blacks were getting attacked, and they were all over the news, and they were crying out for help. Nobody came to help them. However, when they started picking up arms and picking off their attackers and shooting and fighting back, that's when the government called in the National Guard on the black people. That was an act of racism. That was a political act that favored one group over the other. Just because this other group got tired of being oppressed and raped and murdered and killed and robbed and stole from, they started to fight back. Then they said, oh no, you can't fight back. You have to take this because you're an inferior race. So we're going to call in the government, this institution, to quell your revolt. Right here in Goldsboro, North Carolina, an example of racism. The great, late, heralded Charles B. Aycock is an example of racism up in Wilmington. The Wilmington Massacre. When the Wilmington people, they elected a joint black and white government. Everybody was getting along. Your famous governor, Charles B. Aycock, a self-proclaimed white supremacist, said, no, these people right here will not move forward and advance. So we're going to come, we're going to burn this town up, we're going to bomb it, we're going to shoot it up, and we're going to destroy this government. And that's what they did. That was an act of racism. The ability to prevent one group of people from advancing and enjoying life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And nothing was done about it. We can go to Tulsa, Oklahoma. We can go to Rosewood. All of these towns, those are acts of racism. I, Richard Taylor, don't have the ability to go into Walnut Creek or Lane Tree and say, hey, you guys stop living so rich. It's going to be mine now. That I don't have that power. Racism involves power. Just like the big communication companies. They say all of the networks and music and things like are owned by 6 companies. None of those companies are black people. If you want to break into the music business, the television business, you have to go through these people. That is an example of racism. One group of people dominating a certain area of life. And we can go through all the sectors of society to that. Banks. If I go to a bank right now, I'm probably not going to find anyone in the banking ownership level who looks like me. Might be a president who looks like me, but he don't have any owners. Most banks that I go to are owned by somebody who don't look like me. So that person has the power to deny me loans, even if I'm qualified. If you haven't heard about the steering, Wells Fargo not too long ago had a racist exposure. The steering, the redlining, the loans that we're going to only give loans to black people who live in this area because we don't want them living in this area. That's racist. That's the ability to control a person's happiness and well-being, right? Labor, economics. Once again, 9 times out of 10, if I go to a job, most jobs around here, and anywhere you go in the United States that are corporate and public are owned by somebody who doesn't look like me. Right? That is power. That is power to deny me life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Even if I'm qualified. Now we don't want to hire you. We've all heard of the Crown Act, right? They were firing people who wear their hair like me and dread and locks and afros and braids. Oh, that is unprofessional, right? That's unprofessional. Your natural hair, the way it grows out of your head, is unprofessional. So therefore, you are fired. That's racism. The ability to prevent me from living a life to the fullest, right? We can go into the sports arena, right? Sports arena, we were hearing a couple of years ago about how little black coaches there are, right? And it got so bad in the past that the Pittsburgh Steelers owners, which were white guys, the Rooneys, they said, okay, we're going to make this Rooney rule. Because there are hardly no black coaches, we're going to have to interview at least one black coach when we have an opening for a job. That doesn't mean we're going to hire them, but we at least got to say that we gave him a shot. That is power. That is racism. And also, the 32 NFL owners are all white except for one, and I think he's like Mideastern or whatever. But there are no majority black owners. So what do? The owners actually have to approve the sale of a team, which means that is how and there have been plenty of black people who've tried to buy some of these sports teams, but they have been ruled out by the owners. That is racial power. That is racism, saying, okay, look, us 32 white men own these teams. We're not going to let any other black owners in. That's racism. Everybody knows about the Chinese hair industry, right? Anybody who's ever tried to break into Chinese hair, the beauty supply industry, they always tell me how hard it is to let to get those Chinese people to give them. The Chinese people will not sell to you if you're not Chinese. That is racism. The ability to control the economics, the social, the political atmosphere of the environment to the detriment of others. And you wonder why everywhere you go, beauty supply stores are run by Asians, right? But if a black person goes in an Asian restaurant and they get in an argument with the manager and they throw the food back at the Asian, oh, that's racism. He's acting. No, that's not racism. That's just an act of anger, because their food was bad. But racism is these Asians denying black people or anybody for that matter to break into that industry by selling them products. You know what I mean? Police brutality. We all know what happened with We can go down the list. I don't even have to start naming them. You can name up all of the deaths that we've seen with black people getting shot in cold blood, getting shot unnecessarily, getting choked, getting strangled, getting shot in their beds, Breonna Taylor, all of these instances. But what happens when the police go to court? There are laws that has allowed them to get away. But you let a black person shoot a white person in cold blood. Those same laws is going to intern that person for a long, long time. Racism. The ability for laws and policies to favor one group over the other. Laws, medicine, right here in Eastern North Carolina, just in the 70s, 50 years ago, they were actually sterilizing black women in Kinston unknowingly. Racism. The ability to prevent these ladies, because they had nowhere else to go, so the ability to prevent these ladies from having children, dominating them, reducing their ability to multiply through medicine, because why? They control the medicine field, right? All aspects of life, and this is not something that I just drummed up. I've been studying this for years, studying all of the great scholars you probably never going to hear about. Ishaka Musa Barashango, Dr. John Harry Clark, Nellie Fuller, Dr. Yosef Ben Yaakman, Francis Cress Wilson, Steve Coakley, Shahrazad Ali, Layla Africa, Leonard Williams, Delbert Blair, Dick Gregory. All of these great scholars laid it out plain of the systemic nature of racism. Of course, everybody gets along, and this sounds so racist. One of my best friends right now is white, right? That sounds so stupid, right? And I have a lot of associates, people call me all the time, white, black. We talk about things I've said on videos, talk about things. We discuss police brutality. We discuss racism. So in order for us not to be delusional and walk under this veil, and they have something now called white guilt or white fragility, and I understand, because I hate being called out when I know I'm wrong. Like, that kind of hurts, right? So it's hard to really admit or own, you right, I do have an unfair advantage. Yeah, like, that couldn't happen to me. Like, if that did happen to me, I wouldn't go to jail for that long. We all know the disparity between the crack laws in the 80s and the cocaine laws in the 80s. Crack, which was mainly in the inner black cities, was 100 times more sentencing than cocaine, which was normally used by white people. That's racism right there, right? A teacher calling, a student, hey, you little black boy, that's not racism. That's definitely inappropriate. And a black person calling, hey, man, y'all white people, that's not racism, because they don't have the ability to affect my livelihood, right? But when the police pull me over and they say I did something and I clearly didn't do it, and I have proof that I didn't do it, but when I go step in court and the judge doesn't look like me, the prosecutor doesn't look like me, the private investigator doesn't look like me, and they have a system that says whether I did this or not, your black tail going to jail today. That's racism. You understand? So I want y'all to be very clear. I hope I broke this down in layman's terms, because people always get on and they don't have a clue. Either, once again, they are delusional, they are practicing cognitive dissonance, and look that up as well, or they're just clueless of the definition of racism. So that's why I say I can be prejudiced, I can be biased, I can be discriminatory, but none of those things, and I'm not saying I'm those things, by the way, but none of those things are able to be racist unless I have a system to impose those unfair beliefs on the person that they are targeted to. But we all know in this country, past and present, that the inverse is true. Right? There's a homeowner association right now. And that homeowners association can get together, and I want to move in that neighborhood. If they want to practice racism, they can say we're not, you can't move in because of, and they can just throw out any policy, just like the policy that Dr. Witchard conveniently switched to keep me from volunteering, but that's a whole nother story. I'm not going to get into that. But I hope I made sense. 919-587-7782. I really just felt to do a whole video on this because I could not go back and forth explaining myself in the comments to people who are clearly clueless about what real racism is, right? So I hope I've been informative. Y'all can leave y'all opinions in the comments. Not saying I'm going to respond to them. If you want to call me, 919-587-7782, and we can have a genuine conversation. But I'm not going back and forth in the comments because that takes too much of my time. So, peace and blessings. Y'all have a blessed day. I'm out.